Object is nothing but the real world entity. Within one class, I'm going to have the another class. Even I can able to have interface. If I consider methods in Java, all the method name is always going to start with the lowercase letter. To run my main function or main method, I does not require any object. For that reason, it is static. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on classes, objects and methods. I'm your Revati ma'am from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the topic which I have discussed in my last session. So dear student, I started with an arrays. So what is an array and how to create an array and what are the different types of array we can have in our Java program. So these are the topic I have discussed in my previous session, and from the examination point of view, these are the topics very important. That means you can expect anyone's sure question, that is what is an array and explain the type of an array. So what is an array? Here array is nothing but the collection of homogeneous element. Homogeneous element in the sense what? It is same kind or similar kind of elements are stored or grouped under same name. Suppose if I want to access the element, then how I am going to access? With the help of array name. And all the arrays are stored in the continuous memory allocation. And there are two type of array, that is single dimensional array and multi-dimensional array. But dear student, in my today's session, I'm going to deal with what is class, what is object, how to create class, how to define the object, what are the fields of the class. All those things I'm going to deal in my today's session. So dear student, these are the topic very important from the examination point of view as well as from the learning aspects. So dear student, instead of wasting much of time here, directly start with our session, that is classes and objects. So what is class and what is object? So dear student, if I consider object, what is an object? It is a real world entity. It is a real world entity. So real world entity in the sense what? For example, think that I have pen. Now, if I consider this pen, it's going to have the state and behavior. If I consider object, here object is also will have states and behavior. So dear student, if I consider this pen will have the behavior as well as state. Now, if I consider this pen, what is the color of the pen? It is black. What is the height of the pen? What is the shape of the pen? So these are the behavior as well as state. So what is an object here? It's nothing but the real world entity, and it is also known as runtime entity. Now, if I consider class, class is nothing but the group of or collection of object. Now, dear student, let me to consider object here. So, what is object? It's nothing but the real world entity, and it's going to have the state and behavior. So, it is going to have the state and behavior. Now, if I consider state, here states are nothing but the data member data member. And what is behavior? Behaviors are nothing but the property or nothing but the methods that is associated with the object. Now, if I consider this pen, it is going to have the state as well as behavior. So, a class can be defined as template or blueprint. So, here class is nothing but the template or blueprint, and which is going to describe the behavior or state of the object. So what is object? Here object is nothing but the real world entity, and which is going to have this state as well as behavior. But if I consider class, what is class here? That is nothing but the group of object which have similar property or same kind of property. So object have state and behavior. Now if I consider dog, okay, if I consider dog has state, then color, name of the dog, breed of the dog, these are the properties. Here object is nothing but it's going to have this state as well as behavior. Now dear student, what is a class in Java? So dear student, class is nothing but the blueprint as well as it is nothing but the template. Now a class is a group of object. So what is class? It is a group or collection of object which have common properties. So which is going to have the common kind of property, and it's also known as template or blueprint from which objects are created. So dear student, if I want to create object, then what I require? First I want to create the class. Then what is class here? Class is nothing but the blueprint or template, and class includes data members as well as methods. It is a logical entity. It cannot be physical. That means classes are logically present. That means I'm going to create the class and it is a logical entity, or it's also called as runtime entity. So if I consider class in Java, then it includes fields. So here fields are nothing but the data member and methods. So what is method? If I consider C program, methods are nothing but the functions. Similarly, in Java, functions are nothing but the methods. So here I have the methods. Then in my class, I can have the constructor. Even I can able to create nested class. So what is nested class? Within one class, I'm going to have the another class. Even I can able to have interface. So these are the fields I can have in my class. Now, what is object? So object is nothing but the real world entity, and which is going to have the state as well as behavior. So here object is nothing but the instance of a class. Why I want to create instance here? Suppose if I consider the class, in my class I have fields and methods. Now if I want to access methods and field, then what I required? I required object. So dear student, think that you have suitcase. Okay. Now this suitcase is nothing but the class. Okay. In my suitcase, I have cloth, I have jewelers, everything I have kept inside the suitcase. Now, to take my cloth or to take my accessories, what I want to do, I want to open the key or I want to open the lock. To open the lock, I required key. So here, key is nothing but the object. And what is class here? That's nothing but the suitcase. Similarly, an object is an instance of a class. A class is a template or blueprint from which objects are created. Suppose if I want to create the object, then what I want to have? I want to have class. So first I am going to declare the class. For that class, I am going to create the object. So an object is the instance of a class or result of a class. Now, object definition, that means what is object? It is a real world entity, and this object is also called runtime entity. Here object is an entity which is going to have the state as well as behavior, and it's also instance of a class. Now, dear student, I'm going to have the basic syntax. Before that, let me to write the example here. So what is my example? That is, I'm going to create the class and the class name is sample class. Sample class, or I can able to consider the class name that is my first Java class. So what is my class name here? That is my first Java class. So dear student, please make a point here or please make a note here that whatever the file name I'm going to specify, that must be same as my class name. So what is my class name here? That is my first Java class. Then what is my file name here? That is once again my first Java class.java. In the sense, I'm going to store this program with the name my first Java class.java. Why it is .java? Because I'm writing Java program to indicate that I'm going to store the or I'm going to save the file name with the extension .java. And it is case sensitive. If I consider Java program, it is case sensitive in the sense there are certain keywords are going to start from the uppercase letter, only the starting letter. So Java is case sensitive, which means identifier hello, that is uppercase hello, and see here lowercase h hello would be have different meaning in Java. So if I write my Java program, my Java, okay, this is going to have the different meaning than my Java. See here, M is capital letter and this J is capital letter. So that is nothing but the case sensitivity. Now, class name. For all class name, the first letter should be uppercase. See here, this is my example class name. See, M is capital letter, F is capital letter, J is capital letter, and C is capital letter. And method name. All the method names should be start with a lowercase letter. So dear student, if I consider methods in Java, all the method name is always going to start with the lowercase letter. So here, see, what is my method name here? My method name. According to the rule, my first letter should be lowercase letter in my method declaration. For that reason, here I have written my, that is in small letter. Okay, this is the way I'm going to create the class as well as methods. So these are the basic syntax I want to follow while defining classes as well as method. Now see here, program file name. This is also another field. Okay, the program file name must be same as class name. And see here, example, what is my class name here? That is my first Java program. And how I'm going to save the program? That is same file name. That is my first Java program dot Java, and that is extension. And the actual execution of the program is always going to start from the main method. And see here, it is public static void main. Now, it is also a main method. Then why it is void? Because this main method does not return anything. For that reason, it is empty or void. To indicate it is empty, I am going to make it void. Then what is static? So dear student, to run my main function or main method, I does not require any object. For that reason, it is static. Then what about public? This main program can be accessed throughout the program. For that reason, it is void. Now, dear student, I am going to have class definition. That means how I am going to define the class. So, dear student, if I consider class, this is the example for user-defined data type. So, what is user-defined data type here? That means user can able to create their own data type based on their requirement. So, a class is a user-defined data type with a template or blueprint that serves to define its property. So, inside the class, I'm going to have the property. So, what is property here? That is nothing but the field declaration as well as method declaration. So, dear student, this is the syntax or general form. And if I want to create class, then I have to follow this general form. So, what it is? First, I'm going to write the class keyword. Then I'm going to specify the user-defined class name, and whilst writing user-defined class name, I have to follow the rules. Okay, so here class name is nothing but the identifier. And while defining identifier, I have to follow some rules. That means the class name must start with the uppercase letter, only the beginning letters. Then I can able to use lowercase letter. Even I can club with the digit, that is 1 to 0. Then my class cannot be start with the dollar symbol. That means my class name cannot be start with special symbols. So these are the certain rules I want to follow. And if I'm going to use the reusability concept, then I want to extend the class. Okay, at present, no need to concentrate on this part. Just concentrate only about how to create a class. So, class name. Now, I have the opening curly brace. Inside this, I'm going to have the field declaration. That's nothing but the variables. That means whatever the variables I want to use in my program, I'm going to declare it here. Then I'm going to have the method declaration. So this is the simple syntax used to create class. Now, how I'm going to declare the fields? So here fields are nothing but the variables in C program. Data is encapsulated in a class by placing data field inside the body of the class definition. So dear student, here I am going to write the fields, that is data fields, and it is encapsulated. That means I am going to specify the access specifier. That means if it is public, then it is accessed throughout the class. If it is private, only within the class. So if I want to provide data encapsulation, then I'm going to use class. So data is encapsulated in a class by placing data field inside the body of the class definition. See, I'm going to encapsulate the data. These variables are instance variables as they are created whenever an object of the class is initialized or invoked. So these variables are called instant variables because when I create the object, at the same time I'm going to pass the values. For that reason it is called instance variable. And this is the example I have. For example, class is nothing but the keyword, and here rectangle is nothing but the class name, that is user defined class name. Inside that I have two fields, that is length and width, and both of the type integer. Now dear student, how I am going to declare a method? This is the general form. When I consider class, class is going to have the fields and methods. Okay, class is going to have the field, that is nothing but the data field, and it's going to have the methods. So a class with only data field has no life. That means if I declare the variable inside the class and I don't have any methods in my class, then there is no value or there is no life for data fields. The object created by a class cannot respond to any message. That means I have the fields, that is data fields, but I'm not going to use those data fields. Then what is the need of creating object? And it is meaningless. So suppose if I have variables in my class, then I must have the methods, and this is the general form. I want to specify the return type, then I want to specify the method name, and I want to write the parameter list. Now I have the method body. For example, int is my return type and add is my method name, and it's going to have two variables, say A and B. So here it is parameter. Now I'm going to return A plus B. Okay, this is the example for method declaration. Now, dear student, let me to discuss how to create object. So, a class provides the blueprint or template. That means I have designed class. So I have the blueprint, I have the template, but now I want to initialize the object and I want to invoke the method which is present in my blueprint. So a class is a blueprint, or it provides the blueprint for the objects. So basically an object is created from a class. That means for particular class, I'm going to have the particular object. In Java, the new keyword, in the sense, suppose if I want to create object, then I'm going to use the new keyword. And when I create the object, what's going to happen? The memory is allocated. So a new keyword is used to create new object. Now see here, what is my class name? That is rectangle. And what is my object? That is rect1. And see here, I'm going to use the new keyword to create the object, and I'm going to have the class name, and I have the opening and closing parenthesis. So this is the way I'm going to create the object. Now, if I want to access the data field which is present in my class, then with the help of object, that is rect1 dot length. Okay, then rect1 dot width. With the help of object, I'm going to access the fields which is present in my rectangle class. Now, dear student, how to accessing class members? So, class members in the sense what? That is methods and variables. So, dear student, suppose if I want to access the fields and methods in my class, how can I? For that, I'm going to use the object. So, with the help of object name dot variable name. Okay, with the help of object name dot variable name. For the methods, object dot method name, and if I want to pass any parameters, then I want to specify here. So all the variables must be assigned values before they are used. So dear student, if I want to assign the value, then how I'm going to assign the value? That is object dot length equal to 10. From outside the class, we cannot access the instance variable values before they were created. So, dear student, if I write or if I declare the variables in my class and if the values are not yet assigned, then how I'm going to assign the value? That is by using object dot variable name. And we must use object, then we have to use the dot operator to access the variables as well as methods. So what is the syntax? I want to use the object name, then dot operator and variable name or field name, and I'm going to assign the value. If it is method, then object name dot method name, and I'm going to pass the parameters. So dear student, this is the example program I have. So what is my class name? That is student. So what is the rule? While defining class name, the class name must be uppercase letter. So it is S is capital letter. Now here I have the two fields. One is student ID, another one is student name. So ID is of type integer and name is of type string. Over. Now this is my first class. Now see here, I have the another class called test student 2, and inside this class I'm going to write the main function or main method. Now what I want to do, I want to create the object for this student. So how? Student, it's my class name and this one is my object name equal to new keyword and my student. So dear student, with the help of object name, that is S1 and dot operator and field name, and I'm assigning the value 101 to ID. Now I'm assigning name, and what is the name here? It is Hanya. Now what I want to do, I want to display ID and name. And how I'm going to display ID and name? Once again with the help of object and dot operator along with field name. And what is the output I'm going to get? That is 101 and I'm going to get Hanya. Okay, this is the output of this program. Now, dear student, in my today's session, I started with what is object, what is class, how to create class, how to create object, how to define fields, how to define methods, how to access methods, how to access fields. All those things I have discussed. But in my next session, I'm going to deal with constructors in Java. So dear student, these are the basic thing you have to learn and remember, because in Java, we are going to play with classes and objects. And without basic knowledge of class and object, you cannot able to write Java program. So dear student, anyway, let's meet in the next session with the new concept, that is constructor. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.